So if you're like me, you probably grew up learning a very specific, rigid hierarchy of gods and mythological
Right,
beasts.
the classic organizational chart of the heavens.
Exactly. But imagine, like, a mid-level employee just marching into the boardroom, getting into a brutal fist fight with a billionaire CEO, fighting them to a complete standstill, and then the CEO responds by offering that employee the penthouse suite.
It sounds completely absurd.
It really does. But according to the absolute oldest Hindu scriptures, a giant mythical bird did exactly that to the supreme god of the universe. So welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here for this one.
Today, we're opening up a stack of honestly fascinating excerpts from a source called Myth and Matrix. It's this incredible look at the deep and frankly heavily contradictory layers of ancient Hindu scriptures.
Yeah, and the contradictions are really the whole point.
Exactly. Our mission for you today is to unpack this massive cosmic contradiction, to understand why these sacred stories shift so radically over time. And ultimately, we are going to try to peel back the outer shell of all this theology and expose the original truth hidden underneath.
It's a profound journey to take, really, because when you look at ancient texts, contradictions like this are rarely just, clerical errors.
Right, they didn't just misplace a scroll.
Exactly.
Nah.
They are usually these diagnostic markers of a society undergoing massive structural changes. If we want to understand what the texts are actually saying, we have to look past the literal battles. We have to examine the underlying mechanics of how civilizations build and rebuild their belief systems across millennia.
Well, let's just jump right into the main event then, the contradiction that shatters that whole organizational chart we talked about.
Let's do it.
So if you're familiar with the traditional Hindu hierarchy, especially in the later scriptures, like the Vishnu Purana, the structure is incredibly rigid, right?
Very much so. Very clear boundaries.
Yeah. You have Narayana, or Vishnu, operating as the supreme god. He's the preserver of all reality, and he is always depicted resting in this absolute majesty upon Anantashesha, which is the thousand-headed Naga, the cosmic serpent.
Right, the serpent acts as the divine seed.
And then you have Garuda, the giant bird. But in these later texts, Garuda's function is, well, it's strictly utility. He is essentially the divine vehicle for Vishnu, like a chauffeur.
Exactly. It operates as a perfectly unified theological structure. Supreme God, cosmic serpent is the foundation, giant bird is the transportation. It gives the universe a sense of absolute bureaucratic stability.
But, and this is where Myth and Matrix totally hooked me, when you actually rewind the clock and dive into the oldest textual sources, like the Rig Veda or the Adiparva section of the Mahabharata, the continuity completely falls apart.
It totally shatters.
Yeah. In these ancient texts, Garuda is not playing chauffeur at all. Garuda actually engages Narayana in this massive cosmic war.
A literal war.
The text describes their clash as something that shakes all three worlds and dims the heavens. And at the end of this apocalyptic battle, they call it a draw.
Which is wild.
It's insane. Narayana is apparently so moved by Garuda's raw power that he offers him a divine boon. And the boon is the right to sit above him.
It is a complete inversion of the hierarchy that most people are familiar with today.
Yeah.
And it really forces us to rethink entirely what these entities actually represent.
Right, because I was really struggling with the basic physics of this when I read it, because Garuda is traditionally classed as a Tatumaharishika, right? Like a lower tier heavenly being.
Yeah, traditionally in the later frameworks.
So how does a giant bird, even a divine one, physically rival the supreme god? Like, returning to my analogy, that's like a taxi driver fighting a billionaire CEO and tying. Are we talking about a literal fist fight here? Because the mechanical logic just doesn't track for me.
Well, it doesn't track because we are looking at it through a biological anthropomorphic lens, To understand why they tie, we have to discard the idea that Garuda is a bird at all.
Wait, really? Not a bird?
Not in this context, no. In these specific ancient texts, Garuda is explicitly identified as Veda Atman.
Okay, Veda Atman. Let's break down exactly what that means for everyone.
Sure. So it translates to the moving, living embodiment of the four Vedas.
The scriptures.
Right, the Vedas are the absolute foundational scriptures of this theology. They represent the ultimate uncreated truth of the cosmos. So Garuda is the physical manifestation of that cosmic truth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the ancient texts describe his wings not as physical feathers, but as the literal rhythm and vibration of the Vedic chants.
That is so cool.
It is. He is the raw, untamed power of truth that existed before physical matter was even conceptualized.
Wait, So Garuda isn't a biological entity in this context at all. He is literally a sacred frequency, like a song that has taken physical form.
That is the exact mechanism.
Yeah.
Yes, now compare that to Narayana in this specific mythological era.
Okay.
Narayana is the supreme god, but his functional role here is the holder or the preserver of the Vedas. He maintains the truth.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. So this battle in the Adi Parva is not a biological bird fighting a biological deity. It is the raw embodiment of the Vedas, colliding with the structural holder of the Vedas.
Okay, well, now the outcome actually makes total sense. You can't have the holder of truth defeat the literal embodiment of truth.
Exactly.
They are fundamentally composed of the exact same conceptual material. It's like trying to fight your own reflection.
Precisely. They are equal by the very nature of reality. But if we pull the lens back even further, the texts introduce a cosmic genealogy that complicates this relationship even more.
Oh, right, the family tree.
Because this isn't just a clash of metaphysical concepts.
Yeah.
It's actually a family dispute.
Yes, the source material goes into this wildly complex family tree. It turns out that Garuda, the Nagas, Indra, the king of heaven, and the Asuras, the demons, they are all half-brothers.
Yep. They are all offspring of the sage Kashyapa. And Kashyapa is a Prajapati, which is one of the Saptarishis.
I have to stop you there for a second, because when we say Prajapati, we aren't just talking about, like, a biological father with a massive blended family, right? What is the actual mechanism of a Prajapati?
Good clarification.
Yeah.
Think of a Prajapati as a structural blueprint,
Mm.
or like a cosmic patriarch who is responsible for generating the physical forms of all living things in the universe.
Okay, so it's bigger than just a guy.
Much bigger. Kashyapa is basically the organizing principle of biology. Through his various wives, he generates the different mythical races. The birds, the serpents, the gods, the demons, they all share this same foundational blueprint.
But how does Narayana factor into this? Because he's the supreme god. He isn't bound by cosmic biology, is he?
Here is where the timeline gets wonderfully twisted.
Yeah.
In his absolute original state, Vishnu is the Parabrahman. That is the original formless soul state before time even existed.
Right.
But in order to fulfill a divine boon of gratitude, the texts say Vishnu intentionally bound himself to this physical family tree.
He chose to be born into it.
Exactly. He chose to be born to Kashyapa and his wife Aditi as the Vamana avatar, the dwarf Brahman.
Let me make sure I'm tracking this. The infinite, uncreated supreme god effectively writes himself into the biological software of the universe, positioning himself as the younger brother to the giant bird and the cosmic serpent.
That is exactly what happens. It intricately binds the supreme consciousness to the physical world.
Man, that is fascinating. But it also raises a massive red flag for me.
How so?
Well, if this family tree and this fundamental equality between Garuda and Narayana was the established, universally accepted canon of the ancient texts, why did it change?
Right.
Because if you fast forward to the Vishnu Purana, like we said earlier, the bird is demoted to a chauffeur, the snake is just furniture, and Vishnu is the undisputed boss. Who had the authority to rewrite the cosmic organizational chart? Was this a sudden theological schism, or was it a slow burn?
It was a very deliberate, prolonged evolution. And to understand it, we have to completely step out of theology for a minute and step into sociology.
Okay, I like where this is going.
We have to examine the historical rebranding of the gods.
I really want to dig into this because the way the sources describe this shift, it sounds less like a spiritual revelation and much more like a corporate acquisition.
It functioned almost exactly like one, honestly. Hindu texts are not a singular document handed down at one moment in time from a single prophet.
Right, it's not like one guy wrote a book.
Exactly. They are an ongoing, iterative record of human thought spanning roughly 3,000 to 4,000 years. So as the structural needs of human society change, the theological tools required to manage that, society had to change with them.
So let's trace that timeline a bit. Our sources highlight the Vedic era, which peaks roughly around the time of the Buddha. What was the driving societal force during that period?
It was basically utilitarian survival. In the Vedic era, humanity was deeply vulnerable to the elements. The primary existential threats were environmental, storms, floods, drought.
So they needed a god that dealt with that.
Precisely. Therefore, the deity who reigned supreme in their hierarchy was Indra, the god of thunder, storms, and lightning.
Right, because you revere the thing that has the power to wipe out your harvest. So Indra's supremacy wasn't necessarily about deep spiritual enlightenment. It was just practical disaster management.
That's a great way to put it. But as we transition out of the Vedic era and move hundreds of years forward into the Puranic era, the existential threats change. Society is no longer just, isolated agricultural tribes hiding from thunderstorms. We're seeing the formation of real empires.
Right, so you have massive, disparate groups of people being brought under single political and cultural umbrellas, and I'm guessing they are all bringing their own highly specific, hyper-local deities with them.
Absolutely. And if you are the priestly class, the Brahmins, who are tasked with maintaining social cohesion across this sprawling, newly integrated civilization, you are facing an absolute administrative nightmare.
Oh, I bet.
How do you unify a society where 50 different tribes worship 50 different supreme deities without triggering endless religious warfare?
Right, and I'm looking at how they solve this, and it seems almost too convenient. The sources suggest the Brahmins elevated Vishnu and Shiva to act as these ultimate, universal, supreme gods.
Yes.
And then, when they encountered a new local tribe with their own specific god, they didn't outlaw that local god. They just went up and said, hey, your god is incredibly powerful, but did you know he is actually just a localized avatar of Vishnu?
It was an absolute masterstroke of religious survival. The scholars referred to this mechanism as kathenotheism.
Kathenotheism. Break down the mechanics of that for us, because it seems totally central to this whole contradiction we started with.
Kathenotheism is the fluid practice of elevating whichever god is currently in front of you, or whichever god is most vital to a specific community at a specific moment, as the supreme deity for that context.
So it's totally fluid.
Completely.
Yeah.
The hierarchy is not fixed. It is highly adaptable.
If you're listening to this and wondering how millions of people just accepted this theological shift, think about how modern corporate monopolies operate.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Right. When a massive parent company buys out a beloved local brand, they don't shut the local brand down. They keep the logo, they keep the packaging. They just print a subsidiary of Vishnu Core in tiny letters on the back of the box.
That is a highly accurate way to frame it. If the Brahmins are integrating a tribe that centers its entire culture around a serpent deity, they elevate the Naga in the overarching mythology.
Right.
If the society is centralizing around a dominant king-like ruler, they elevate Vishnu to represent ultimate royal authority. And certainly the eagle and the serpent are repositioned as his servants to symbolize his dominance over the sky and the earth.
Man, it completely reframes the text. The entire outward structure of the religion, like who fights who rides what, who sits on the throne, it's all just a fluid user interface designed to manage the specific sociological needs of a given era.
Which is why understanding this is such a vital, critical thinking tool for the listener. Whenever you read ancient history and hit a glaring contradiction, when text A says a figure is an equal and text B says that same figure is a servant, you have to look at the social incentives of the authors. What administrative or political problem were they trying to solve when they wrote it down?
But this naturally leads to a fairly cynical question.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Right, because if the epic battles, the avatars, the shifting hierarchies, if all of this outer shell was just a fluid survival mechanism for social cohesion, is the core completely hollow? Like, is ancient religion just a sophisticated marketing campaign?
That is exactly where this deep dive takes its most profound turn. Because while the branding, the packaging, and the hierarchy constantly shifted, the texts revealed that the true philosophical core never changed at all.
Really?
Never. Let's talk about the Upanishads for a second.
Oh, yeah. These texts seem to strip away all the mythological battles entirely and focus purely on the underlying physics of reality.
Exactly. And they distill the ultimate truth of the universe down to a three-word phrase. Tat Tivam Asi.
Tat Tavam Asi. It roughly translates to that thou art, or that is you, right?
Exactly.
I want to try and visualize the mechanics of this, because the sources describe the ultimate truth not as a biological person sitting in the sky, but as Brahman, which is pure, formless, infinite spiritual energy.
Right.
And they say every human being possesses an Atman, a pure soul. So if I am trying to map this out conceptually, if Brahman is an infinite ocean of energy, my Atman isn't like a separate, distinct entity floating in that ocean. I'm literally a single drop of that exact same water.
The substance is identical.
Right. We are exactly the same stuff.
That synthesis is functionally perfect.
Yeah.
You are the drop, the universe is the ocean. Tat Tavam Asi. You are that ocean. And when you apply that realization back to the mythology, it completely dismantles the literal interpretation of the gods.
So Indra, Vishnu, Shiva, Garuda, They aren't real.
Well, in the framework of the Upanishads, none of them are biological beings. They are categorized as Maya.
Now, Maya is a term that gets thrown around a lot. People usually just translate it as illusion, right? But the sources frame it much more mechanically than that.
Yes, calling it an illusion implies it's a trick or a falsehood, which is totally reductive. A better way to understand Maya in this context is as a necessary cognitive window.
A cognitive window.
Right. The human brain is evolutionarily incapable of conceptualizing pure, formless, infinite energy. We cannot interact with the pure abstraction. So human consciousness generated these deities, these windows with faces, names, and dramatic narratives to give us a focal point.
Okay, I've got it. It operates exactly like a computer desktop.
Oh, how so?
Well, when you're using a computer, you are never actually interacting with the raw binary code or the physical microchips, right? You are just clicking on a tiny picture of a folder.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So Vishnu, Garuda, the cosmic serpent, these are just the folder icons that allowed the ancient human mind to interface with the infinite, unreadable code of the universe.
The user interface analogy is spot on. The deities are the UI. And because this philosophical core, this idea that all forms are just Maya covering the same ocean of Brahman, because it was so inherently flexible, it paved the way for one of the most massive historical crossovers in religious history.
Yes, the Great Fusion.
Hmm.
The sources highlight this period between the years 800 and 1500 CE, and honestly, this completely blew my mind. You have Hinduism and Mahayana Buddhism essentially swapping intellectual DNA on a massive scale.
It is a phenomenal period of philosophical cross-pollination.
Mm.
You have to remember, early Buddhism, like Theravada Buddhism, was quite strict in its rejection of the Hindu pantheon and its rituals.
Right, they wanted nothing to do with it.
Exactly. But as Mahayana Buddhism evolved, it became deeply focused on the intricate nature of mind and reality. And since it was growing in the exact same soil as Hinduism, interacting with the exact same populace, they began to recognize the utility of each other's tools.
What did that swap actually look like mechanically on the ground? Because the sources get very specific here, and it's fascinating.
Well, Mahayana Buddhism realized the immense psychological power of a rich pantheon. So they developed the bodhisattvas.
Which are?
They are enlightened beings of immense compassion, like Avalokiteshvara, who functionally operated very much like Hindu deities. They served as accessible focal points for the masses.
So they built their own desktop icons.
Exactly. They also adopted fierce, wrathful deities to represent the destruction of ignorance, drawing heavy iconographic inspiration directly from Shiva.
And it went all the way down to the rituals, too, right? The sources mention the development of Buddhist Tantra.
Yes, Vajrayana Buddhism and Hindu Tantra began mirroring each other intensely. They were both utilizing the exact same tools.
Like mandalas?
Right, mandalas for visual focus, mudras for physical alignment, and mantras, which are sacred sound frequencies.
Wait, sound frequencies like Garuda as Veda Atman, the frequency of truth.
Exactly. Both systems recognize that sound vibration is a literal technology for altering consciousness.
That is so cool. And Hinduism wasn't just sitting by and watching this happen, right? They were actively absorbing Buddhist elements in return. The emphasis on universal compassion seeped deeply into later Hindu texts.
They did.
And then Hinduism executes what has to be the ultimate kathenotheistic maneuver.
Oh, it really is. They adopted the Buddha himself.
They literally patched the founder of a rival philosophy into their own software. They wrote the Buddha into their theology as the ninth avatar of Vishnu.
Just incredible.
They just looked at this massive competing system and said, yes, he's one of ours too. Just another perfectly valid desktop icon pointing to the same underlying code.
It is the ultimate proof of their underlying philosophy. If all forms are Maya, then no single form has a monopoly on the truth.
Right.
The Buddhist framework and the Hindu framework essentially merged into a dual operating system, utilizing different metaphors to wake the individual up to the exact same reality.
That they are a drop in the infinite ocean.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the core takeaway we want you to walk away with today. If you take anything from this deep dive, let it be this. When you read an ancient text that says Garuda the bird defeated the Naga, and then you read a later text claiming the Naga is infinitely superior, the contradiction is not a mistake, it is a feature.
Exactly. The ancient scholars were not confused. They were utilizing these epic, contradictory narratives as highly specific tools. They were calibrating their teachings to the sociological needs and the cognitive capacity of their specific era.
Right. Beneath the chaotic, constantly shifting shell of these mythological hierarchies, the mechanism remains perfectly intact. Whether you are a cosmic bird, a thousand-headed serpent, or a person listening to this deep dive right now, you are composed of the exact same original truth. Tat tivam asi.
Separating the shifting metaphor from the eternal mechanism is the ultimate exercise in critical thinking.
And I want you to try applying that critical lens to your own life. The next time you are reading a history book or watching a fiercely debated news cycle and you encounter deeply conflicting narratives, take a step back. Ask yourself, what is the shell here? What specific social or political incentive is driving the creation of this narrative for the masses right now?
And what is the actual unvarnished core truth hidden underneath all that branding?
Exactly. We always have to identify the Maya we are operating within.
Beautifully said.
So that leads me to one final, slightly provocative thought I want to leave you to mull over. We spent this entire time unpacking how ancient sages used these vivid, contradictory myths, birds, serpents, multi-armed deities, as a user interface to help the ancient mind process formless, infinite reality. They built metaphors because they didn't have the capacity to process the raw data.
Because the human mind will always require a metaphor to grasp the infinite.
So think about our world today. What modern scientific metaphors or societal myths are we blindly accepting right now as literal, absolute truth, simply because we don't yet have the mental capacity or the technological tools to understand the raw data of the universe? When we talk about atoms as tiny solar systems, or string theory, or the simulation hypothesis, are we just clinging to our own modern versions of giant birds and cosmic serpents without even realizing it? Think about that.